Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Alfred Laupheimer, and tonight I'm being afforded the opportunity of playing my own favorite music.
Thank you, Mr. Laupheimer. And this is Sam Stewart of WIP, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we are presenting another program of a tape-recorded series in which we invite famous Philadelphians to come to our microphone, play some of their own favorite recorded music, tell us why these songs are their favorites, but mostly to tell us something about themselves. And tonight our very special and interesting guest is Mr. Alfred Laupheimer, president of the General Public Warehouses Incorporated of Philadelphia and operator of a tramp shipyard for the United States Navy in the Kensington section of Philadelphia. Mr. Laupheimer, before we play your first musical selection tonight on Famous Philadelphians, I'd like you to tell us rather quickly, if you can, in a short space of time, what do you mean by operating tramp shipyard for the United States Navy?
Oh, summarized real quickly, Mr. Sirotto. I lease the yard from the United States Navy on a fixed rental basis.
Do you build ships up there now?
We do not build any ships. We rent the various facilities to other industry and operate some of the bigger areas as a general public warehouse.
Actually, there aren't building ships up there at Tramps now, are they?
We have rented the dry dock area and some of the machine shop areas to the Keystone Shipyard and Repair Company of Philadelphia, who are doing that type of work and repair work. They have a carrier and a destroyer in the yard at this moment doing repair work.
But ostensibly, you're keeping the yard up there busy against the time when the Navy will want to reclaim it entirely for the purposes of building ships.
Yes, the yard is in a good standby condition today. We have physically and the labor pool and the various small industries, relatively speaking, who have rented from us, who keep the groups busy, such as Clearmont Engineering, Plymouth Cordage, Remanufacturing, one of our large tenants, has a work group of approximately 800 to 900 people at all times on their payroll.
Well, that's a story we'll want to get from you a little bit later on. Certainly it must be an interesting one. The story of how you arrived at the position where you became the lessee of a huge shipyard for the United States Navy.
And not building ships.
And not building ships. But now, we also play some music on this program. We understand that you are a hi-fi addict.
I'm a hi-fi addict, but I play it by ear, strange as it may seem. I'm not a technician or shall we say...
Well, most hi-fi addicts play it by ear, don't they?
Well,
they have to play it so that they can hear it, and the volume goes up so many degrees that the people in the immediate vicinity sometimes have to close their own to keep the sound from encroaching.
How true. But my neighbors happen to be music lovers, so I'm not embarrassed. I hope not.
They're fortunate, and so are you. But tell us, what have you chosen to play for us first tonight?
Well, the first one we're going to play is a Sonata by Beethoven.
One of your favorites on your own hi-fi?
This is one that I like very much.
Well, let's invite our listeners to enjoy it with you then. delightful. That was delightful. Was there much difference between hearing it now and hearing it on your hi-fi set?
I play it a little louder home.
Well, we leave that up to our listeners. If they want to ride the volume on their own receiving set, that's perfectly up to them. We're going to try and play some more of Mr. Laupheimer's selections on this broadcast tonight, but at this time we want to find out just a little bit more of his story, this story of a businessman virtually operating in the public interest. Actually, that is what you were doing by keeping the warehouse occupied against the time when the United States Navy may feel called upon to take it back again from you.
It's in public interest, but it's also in the interest of my pocketbook to make it a profitable interest.
Well, then it satisfies both ideas, doesn't it?
Both ideas. It has to.
Well, let's find out how you arrived at this position, where you became the operator of Cramp Shipyard for the United States Navy in this interim time. Are you a native Philadelphian?
Yes, I was born in Philadelphia. I'm 1898 up in the Kensington section near Front New York.
Front New York. Well, that sort of brings you right back to the old neighborhood again. Cramps is right there in Kensington,
Well,
too.
it's just a stone's throw from the old Kensington section.
It's a good throw.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Something like the one that Washington did when he threw the dollar across the Rappahannock.
It's about the same distance.
You went to school there in the neighborhood?
Yes, I went to the Philip H. Sheridan School and 2 years at Frankfurt High School when it was an annex, and then finally I wound up in Germantown Academy. And that was in 1917, and we had World War I and enlisted in the Navy then, and was in that served for 2 years.
What was your ambition at the time, up to the time that the war interfered?
I hope to have been a singer, strange as it may sound, winding up as a businessman, but...
You mean a forerunner of the Sinatras and the Frankie Lanes and the Eddie Fishers?
No, we were just going to sing honest to God, not crooning.
Well, what do you mean? You were going in for the classical?
Yes.
You had hopes and aspirations someday to have been a singer with the Metropolitan Opera, perhaps?
Well, I thought I might, yes, but I got either tired or... I think it was more the fact that my father had business problems in 1919 when I gave up, because it meant to take hold, and we had a rather large family, and everybody had to pitch in to keep the wolf out of the entry.
How many were in the family?
Well, I have a brother and 2 sisters, and they were all younger than I am. I was in 1919. Actually, I was 21, and my brother was 2 years younger, and my sister, they were kids. So my father failed in business, and in 1919 I went to work and tried to help make things go around.
What sort of work did you go in for at that time?
Well, I went to Atlantic City and got a job, and worked in a hotel, and strange as it may seem, that was my first business venture. And with one of the men who I'd met in the service, we rented a small hotel. And
this was after your years in the service?
That's right, 1919.
You enlisted in the Navy?
Yes, I enlisted in the Navy as a third-class fireman, and came out a second-class machinist. But I had no actual sea duty. I spent the whole time here in Philadelphia, and had been assigned to, after several months in the Navy, to investigation work out of Department of Justice at that time, and Francis Fisher Kane and Todd Daniels was his assistant, and they assigned 4 other enlisted men and myself to the district attorney's office for various investigating work. And as a matter of fact, our offices were located right here where this present building stands.
Had you no hankering to go into law with the sort of background that you got during those years?
That background discouraged me entirely.
Really?
It was it was just sorted in the part we had. Particularly, we were first assigned to, at that time, vice work, and it wasn't very pleasant. And it seemed the way all this thing worked, it was most discouraging to me. I thought it was just the last place I'd ever want to be.
Yours is a case of a businessman vying with the intellectual who was sensitive to good music, trying to find his spot in the world. Is that it?
Well, it was just chasing bootleggers and the things that connected with it. It wasn't very interesting what I wanted to do, but we were stuck with it. We enlisted, but it wasn't the way I thought you should serve out in the service when all the rest of the group that enlisted with me all got out to see something and got some action. I didn't. As a matter of fact, it's a little playback on Cramp Shipyard. I was a commandant's orderly, and I thought I had made quite an impression on his his aide, Lieutenant Commander Goss, there was a destroyer being built at Cramp Shipyard at that time, and he had promised to take me on this destroyer when it went into commission. But at that time, I was told that I'd make a much better investigator than a sailor, not having had any training.
So investigating work.
So I was in investigating work until February of 1919, when we were discharged from this federal building right across the street.
All right, now let's pick up the story again from the time after service. You went to Atlantic City, you say, and got yourself a job.
Got a job which lasted about a week, and this man Thomas Sullivan, who was a
What sort of a job was it?
well, we were just plain laboring work. That's all. I was a youngster, 21 years old. You just took on anything, but I didn't like that type of work. And then Sullivan came down, and we decided we ought to go in business for no good reason, except that I thought that it looked easy. Let's put it that way. All you had to do is clean rooms and rent them. So we decided to pool our resources as small as they were, and we rented a hotel at 137 South Tennessee Avenue and went in business. And it worked out very well. Everyone knew it was a similar thing to the World War II. Everyone had money, and I don't think it took any particular brain, just a strong back. And we made a financial success out of it. But
Well, did this steer you away from going on into college?
that ended all thought of education, because the money did come a little. It was seemingly easy, considering the wages we drew or salary as a sailor, as an investigator, to this hotel thing, which was cash. It was fast cash, and I stayed the season and sold out my interest and came back to Philadelphia, and that was the first business venture. And my friend Sullivan stayed in Atlantic City, and is still there, as a matter of fact.
Well, that was just the beginning of your business
That
career.
was the beginning of my business career.
What were the highlights that followed after that?
Well,
What came next?
Well, I came back to Philadelphia and took a tour, or shall we say a tour? It was work, merchant marine, and made several trips to Europe as an ordinary seaman.
Good and economical way of seeing the world.
And I did see a bit of the world, and not having gotten overseas during the war, it was quite interesting.
What countries did you visit?
Well, I got to England and Germany, and that's about all.
You had some time to spend
And
visiting those countries?
I managed, with my knowledge of German, of course, when I got over there, I hired someone to do my shore work, and I visited all through Germany and had a very interesting time, visited relatives, etc., and people whom I'd never seen.
Mm-hmm. Then you came back to this country, and what
Then
happened?
came back to Philadelphia, and the first business venture was a friend of mine had a business of manufacturing visors for Model T Fords, and they were in difficulties, and I was put in as a receiver. This was in 1921, and
You were put in as a receiver?
it wasn't a quarter-point receiver, but the thing had reached a point where it wasn't profitable, and this man who put me in there wanted to salvage his investment, and more with the idea of winding it up and putting it completely out of business. But I had other ideas. After looking it over, we was more or less of a assembly plant, and what I started to do was do some of our own operations, and where they had been buying castings and having them polished and so forth, I decided we should do that all ourselves, and it worked out rather successfully. And it was in the end, if I can remember correctly, this visor started to die off because Fords were equipped with them, and we sold out the visor business and stayed in the finishing of castings and polishing and plating business. In the interim, we had bought a business, and I stayed with that for several years and finally sold out my interest. I believe it's still in business up on Atlantic Street today under the name of I believe, Nedland Manufacturing Company.
So you went from one business to the other. How many businesses did you hop, skip, and jump to until you wound up at Cramp Shipyard?
Well, from there, I went into started to do building business and stayed with that pretty much until business got very, very bad in a depression. And, or if we may use that, that's a bad word, I guess. However, in 35, I got in the business of buying, selling surplus because there wasn't any building. Finally developed into a retail store, which lasted several years. And I sold that and finally went back to building in 1939. And I stayed with that until, all through the war, until 1945. I made a trip to Florida when I thought I'd sit down and take it easy. The war was about over.
Well, now, wait a moment.
Oh, yes, I was married in 1921, October 3rd, 1921. Matter of fact, that happened when I returned to the States, and I could see with the inflation, particularly in Germany, that what you could buy, and I said, I'm going over, but I never got over. I never went back.
You got married and stayed here to raise a family.
I raised a family. We have 3 children now. I guess I might as well tell you their age as long as I've
We'd like to know. We'd also like to know their names and what they're doing.
My oldest boy is my namesake, Alfred. He's 31. And I have second boy, Curtis. He's 29. And my youngest son will be 24 in November.
What are they doing?
Well, my 2 oldest boys are in my organization now. They are running the Boston yard at this moment.
You mean you operate more than one shipyard for the Navy?
Yes, we have one in Boston, too. They were both in the Navy during the war and then back again during the Korean situation and now running the Boston end.
They, too, had the war situation to face, as you did back in 1917.
That they did. And my youngest boy, he's still in the service. He's the one who came out. John, he graduated from Princeton in 1948, and of course, 52 rather, pardon me, and then immediately went in the service. His tour of duty will be up this summer, about the 1st of July.
Will he go into the business with you?
Well, he's entered at Harvard and to go to law school, but he's not sure if he wants to continue now or come in with us. I'm going to let him make the decision.
Well, he sees how Pop's doing all right without the college education.
Well, he'd be a little helpless when he's a spark plug, the youngest one, not taking any bouquets away from the 2 oldest boys.
Are the 2 oldest boys given thoughts to marriage?
Alfred is married. He has 2 children, one 9, Richard, and John, 4.
Well, that makes you a grandfather.
I am a grandfather.
And a very happy one, I see.
Very happy.
Well, that's
very proud.
Well, that time is going around fast. I thought we were going to have some more time to play one of your high-fly selections here. We haven't yet gotten into the story of how you finally landed up at Cramps, so if you don't mind, I think we'll forego the playing of some more music until we get that story, and then perhaps if we have some time, we'll play another selection.
All right. Well, I became a tenant of the firm, Mr. Lee, in 1949, and when he gave up in about 2 years ago, just exactly 2 years ago, in February, I took over temporarily on what the Navy called an emergency agreement, which lasted several months while the Navy presented this thing for public bids. And of course, after the bidding, naturally, there were about 15 bidders, of which I was one, and I made the most substantial bid, and I became the permanent lessee or landlord for the Navy. That lease has 4 more years to go. I have actually operated for 2 years, 1 year under an emergency agreement and 1 year under the lease. So there's still 4 years to go under our lease.
Well, you're not only keeping yourself busy and the Cramp Shipyard occupied, but you're also creating employment for a great number of people up there, you and the other tenants.
Yes, we have substantial payrolls. We have approximately 15 tenants in various industries who use the facilities.
How many employees would you say they number?
I think our total employees in the yard today are approximately 2,500, I would say.
You're providing jobs for those men who otherwise...
Indirectly, yes.
Well, they would have been out of jobs had they had to close Cramp Shipyard as they did once before after the First World War.
Well, it will not close this time, I assure you. I say this with reservation. I'm not a shipbuilder, but I think it'd be a matter of 100 days it could start turning out ships. Because everything is kept in good repair. That's part of the condition of our lease. And we have naval resident engineer on the site at all times, and that entails the maintenance, which we are rather proud of.
Well, that's fine. I think you ought to be commended by all Philadelphians, and particularly those people who live in that vicinity up there, for keeping Cramp Shipyard alive. Now, folks love to play this music on the hi-fi set that you have at home, and I understand you put it together from all of the component parts that you bought.
I bought these several in various parts from locally after 18 months or more of listening to various parts, and I think I have the best. We all think so. If not, we'll change again. But so far, I'm very happy with it.
Mrs. Laupheimer, too, enjoys playing it.
She likes it very much.
And we enjoy hearing you play your set at top volume?
I have Mr. Padre of the Inquirer next door, and normally the neighbor would complain, but Mrs. Padre is a quite an accomplished pianist. I think she's actually professional quality. And so I think we both...
It's nice to have neighbors who are mindful of hi-fi and enjoy it with you. Because I understand that all hi-fi addicts claim they must play the set at top volume in order to get the finest nuances of sound.
I'm afraid I have to agree that it should be played fairly loud, because you figure out everything if you play it too low.
We can't get into a discussion on that. Mr. Laupheimer, it's been more than a pleasure. I've had you here tonight to play at least one of your favorite recorded selections, and I want you to know that you take leave with our very, very best wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Sirota. And you can count on me to listen to all future programs in these series.
Well, thank you now for being our guest tonight on Famous Philadelphians at the Mic. Programs as Famous Philadelphians. We will be very happy to have your suggestions and also your comments on tonight's program. We ask you to write to us in care of Famous Philadelphians, WIP Philadelphia 7. And next Thursday evening at this time, we will have by tape recording another famous Philadelphian at our microphone to bring you some of his favorite recorded music. We hope that you will be in our audience then. For now, thank you for listening.